Today is January 28th, 1975, and I'm interviewing Dr. Aryeh Nesher, 51 West 51st Street, New York, 10019. It's the 23rd floor.
Just to remind me that I met chaplains in my life in Germany.
Right. I wanted to know where, when, and under what circumstances did you first come into contact with an American Jewish chaplain?
Is it going on?
Yes, it's going.
Now, I met for the first time an American Jewish chaplain in the city of Regensburg, which is Niederbayern and Oberpfalz. It's just like Munich was Oberbayern, we were Niederbayern. And there I met Rabbi Gene Lippman, who was my first rabbinical contact.
Now, under what circumstances did you meet Rabbi Lippman? And when was this? What year?
This was 1945, September, I imagine. And we were coming through the Bricha from Czechoslovakia, and the train was en route to Munich. But there were people on the train who advised that we don't go to Munich, since it's a city of black marketeers, they told us, and the new community is being established in Regensburg, and they convinced us to get off in Regensburg. And I remember we went to a temple where I met the first Jews who were there, and then they told us that they are about to organize a local committee, and then I met a captain, chaplain, Rabbi Lippman, who was linked to a unit but dedicated some of his time to this community.
Now, how was he able to help you or your group?
Now, he helped in three directions. Number one, he was the address for packages the Jews would send to Germany. I have no idea what the source of the packages was, that these were private people or these were institutions.
No, these were private people.
Private people. And I remember that we had a warehouse where these packages were being dismantled, discarded, and things were being put in a certain method, system, ordered. And I know all this was the supervision of the rabbi. Number two, the rabbi served as a liaison with American authorities. And later, my close relationship with this rabbi was based on the fact that I got very active in organizing what we call the Central Committee of Niederbayern Oberpfalz, which became kind of competition to the Central Committee in Munich for Oberbayern. That means we were a separate body of Jews, and probably like any good Jews, you first create separate bodies before you unite. We did it, and just like Rabbi Klausner was the rabbi of Munich, right, Rabbi Lippman was the rabbi of Regensburg. And very, very early in the game, I was elected chairman of the committee in Regensburg, and Rabbi Lippman helped me personally a lot in methods and thoughts and ideas on how to approach the American authorities. We also took lots of advice from him on how to prevent the establishing of a camp. Regensburg was one of the first communities not to have an UNRWA camp, but rather we convinced the mayor of Regensburg to give us the homes of former Nazis who were evicted, and I think Regensburg was one of the first cities where this succeeded, not to bring back people to camps again, but rather to create some semblance of normalization. So Rabbi Lippman was very instrumental in advising and helping and contact with the military government and so on. Then point three, Rabbi Lippman was related to us in very practical help in Pesach by Passover, stealing matzahs. I remember he had an assistant whose name was, what was his name? A slim guy with glasses who had this wonderful Jeep. So he stole the matzahs from Jewish soldiers from the army and brought them to us. He also helped us with all kinds of materials needed for the Bricha, which dealt with all kinds of against cold clothing and covers and I remember some gasoline we got. I remember the big truck and gasoline was unloaded. Rations, sea rations. Now, I would not recommend this be written in a book because this was real stealing.
Well, this was done by other chaplains as well.
I don't know. I just don't want
yeah.
mine to get into trouble.
You mean your Rabbi Lippman?
Yes.
Well, he's told us that he's done this before.
Okay.
And it's,
okay. So
yeah.
I'm just.
Now, what you mentioned the fact that he was instrumental with the army in getting you houses instead of a camp.
Correct. Now, this is not exactly the army. It's the municipality, and the army was really a side factor, but the army had to give its approval.
Okay. Now, what do you think might have happened had he not been there? In other words, I'm trying to really pinpoint it to what his role was. If there had been no Jewish chaplain there, do you think you would have been able to accomplish what you were able to do in that one specific?
Now I'd like to speak about my specific case because by January 46 I was moved to Munich and I became a member of the big central committee.
Right.
That's where I met the other chaplains. As far as the initial stages of organizing a Jewish community, I can say with a very clean conscience that the role of Rabbi Lippman was a crucial one. If you add to this his function on the border and his relationship to Bricha,
okay,
and all his activities related in facilitating the movement of Jews from, this was a place called Schwandorf and Kamm, which were our border points. Mm-hmm. His assistance was of vital importance. Now, if you would ask a hypothetical question, what would have happened if he wouldn't have been there? Things which would have gone much, it's an iffy question,
yeah, well,
much more difficult. You know, there were places in Europe where there were no chaplains, and,
right,
and Jews survived. You know, Jews moved from Hungary to Czechoslovakia without chaplains. But greater trouble, more arrests, less food, more friction, more suffering. I think the great contribution of these rabbis, I may say, they served as a kind of oil which was lubricating the wheels which were functioning between us and the outside world, because they belonged to both worlds. They were really the first ones to belong to both worlds. You had another group which were the soldiers of the Jewish brigade, yeah, which had a completely different function. They were our relationship to Jewish culture and kibbutz understanding and Palestine and so on. But if you take the life and the first attempts of recreating some semblance of normality and some semblance of system, of method, I would say they were the first sane people that we encountered, Jews who belonged to the world and belonged to us. I would define them as the best bridges which we had with the world.
Now, how was Rabbi Lippman able to help you bridge this? You mentioned the fact that he was able to help you with with getting housing.
First of all, I would categorize them under three headings.
Okay.
One was material help. He was a bridge to the outside world, to our needs. I remember he sometimes advised me in my contact with UNRWA. He would sometimes be the spokesman when I would fail and then help us through his contacts. So one would be material needs.
Either through getting it?
Either getting it or helping us getting it through any ways. The other aspect would be the public relations aspect, kind of contact with military government especially. I know of cases of arrests when he was instrumental in either getting Jews out or explaining reasons why, how. He would explain. Okay, so the second subheading would be in the field of public relations, representing us to the authorities, being with us. He did a great job, I know, in explaining to American officers who we were, why we were different. I know of cases when Jews were arrested and he got them out for minor things. So this would be the second package. And the third package would be the whole area of his activities in our illegal movement, either into or out of. And he was actively involved in the whole Bricha structure. He was part of the
How would you
group.
characterize his role in Bricha? What were some of the things that you remember, specific episodes that he might have been involved with?
Oh, I remember when I was on the other side, when I was in Pilsen, that we were told, you come on the other side and there is a chaplain, an American captain of the army, don't worry, waiting. So number one, it was the feeling of not being completely hefker, of not being completely alone. Number two, whenever misunderstandings happened with the army, arrests or no, he was there and he cleaned things up. Of course, I couldn't say too much because I was a victim. I was one of those who crossed, so I have no perspective from above. You would have to talk to people who know what he did. But I know that the name Gene Lipman was identical with Bricha on this border.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, was there anything else on Rabbi Lipman that you thought should be mentioned?
Yes, I think that he had a great service as an educator, as a social consultant. I know of hours, days, that he was sitting and receiving individuals who would share with him their troubles. They were looking for family and couldn't find, and he would know how to contact the JDC, and there was an institution called the Suchdienst, which was the structure built in Munich to look for relatives or for people that were friendly, anything, just a word. So I would say that a completely different role was the role of a spiritual leader, of a mentor, of an advisor, of a social advisor. Mm-hmm. And in this, he played a very important role, probably more than any other chaplain I know about.
Now, these people came to him and...
Came to him in the committee, and he was sitting and receiving them and listening and trying to find solutions.
What was his relationship to the committee? Did he dictate a lot?
No, the committee considered him the closest person it had. It considered him an advisor and a source of...
He didn't initiate it.
This I wouldn't know, because I was among those... There are about 10 of us who think we initiated it, so you have lots of us. I don't think initiation was... that this is the great problem. I think there was a need of a Jewish body to decide Jewish fate and struggle and fight, and he was an integral part of it. And he had a share not smaller than any one of the so-called leaders of DPs in crystallizing it, building it, structuring it, forming it.
Fine. Now, what was your relationship with the JDC in the early months?
Now, we had a JDC office, its director. Now, the guy who was director of JDC in Regensburg was a guy named Joe Levine, who is now in...
Indianapolis. Excuse me.
No, Fort Wayne, yes. Now, the relationship with JDC was very good. I consider him one of the best people. In general, we were blessed with the American part. It was very good people, warm people. And of course, the committee was deeply involved with JDC. We were almost functioning together, like later in Munich.
Well, all right. Now, what I'm trying to understand is there any point in time that Rabbi Lipman's role became unimportant, and when the JDC came?
I don't think so. First of all, I left Regensburg by January 46.
Okay.
So these were still, it was less than a year after liberation. So there was place for 5 JDCs and for 5 Lipmans. So this question is really irrelevant for the first year at least. What happened later, I don't know, because I was out of Regensburg, and then I entered the Central Committee and had much less perspective of the direct involvement of the chaplain.
I see. So in other words, what you're saying is that because there was so much work, there was room for a Joe Levine and a Eugene Lipman. And
then the character was very different. The JDC did not participate in the Bricha as they were not on the border. There was here physical labor. The Rabbi Lipman was on the border. He solved problems. There was a sick woman. There was a child who couldn't go on. Somebody was picked up by a policeman and arrested. The nose was too long. So different function. And then as far as material help, the packages which Lippmann brought were additional packages and didn't compete with JDZ. There wasn't enough anyhow. And as far as Passover, matzot, there was never enough. Was never enough. And as far as materials for Bricha, in Regensburg, I don't remember JDC participating with material help to Bricha as an official body. I remember stealing. We stole. Everybody stole. But Lippmann participated actively in the whole Bricha concept and the material aspects of it.
Fine. If there's nothing else you'd like to say about Rabbi Lippmann, then we'd go on.
No, I love him. I think he was the finest man we had in Germany, and I probably knew most of them.
Mm-hmm. Now, from Regensburg, you went to Munich.
To Munich, yes.
In January of 1946.
Correct.
And you became...
These were the elections of the Central Committee of Liberated Jews.
Right, and you became part of the...
And I became the Secretary General of the committee.
In which case you were in... you saw Rabbi Klausner.
Yes.
Now, how would you describe his activities?
Now, there was a legend about Klausner, which I'm not part of, because I was Regensburg. We fought Munich.
What were you fighting about?
I think we were a much more democratic body. The very fact that we lived in a town, and the people that formed the Central Committee in Munich were mainly people from Landsberg and Fernwald and came from camps, were much more dependent. We were more independent. On the other hand, I know that Rabbi Klausner lived in the house of the JDC physically. I was present several times when Bricha groups got the address to whom to come, and I remember a joke, I don't know if it'll help in your book, which was a good joke. I heard about it next day. There were people with Bert in Payas, Hasidim, and Rabbi Klausner asked them who they were, what they were, and so on. And they said, oh, they were from Shomer HaTzair. Shomer HaTzair brought them over, and they were deep Hasidim. And they say, you are a Shomer HaTzair? And one of them said, we are as much Shomer HaTzair as you are a Rov. They didn't know who he was. So this worked well. So I know of his deep involvement in Bricha. I know that he had huge warehouses of clothing. I know that we had discussions with him while in Regensburg. Rabbi Lippmann delivered them to us, and we distributed them. I heard rumors that in Munich he had a hand over these things, and he decided where they go. There was a much more authoritarian regime, and that's why the difference between Lippmann and Klausner.
That's why I asked you about Rabbi Lippmann.
Yes, yes. But I'm very not neutral, very not objective, very, very one-sided. I love Lippmann. Mm-hmm. And I loved him to the end. And take in America, I was yesterday with Lippmann in Washington. Yesterday, he still helped me on my UJ job, in soliciting people. And Klausner is a wonderful guy somewhere, I don't know where.
He's in Yonkers.
He's in Yonkers. Oh yes, in Yonkers.
Well, what else could you tell me about Rabbi Klausner as you saw him as Secretary General?
Now I must tell you, when I came in, we didn't have good relations with Klausner, because Klausner was kind of liaison. He was the man who represented the army, kind of. Although he was very illegal and very AWOL, but had friends and pulled strings and ran a whole thing. My whole strength in the Central Committee, I don't know if anybody spoke about me, I was the only non-Zionist. You see, they all came from Zionist movements, and I was the only non-Zionist, and I was the only guy who was not in a concentration camp. I survived in the underground. And I was the only Romanian. Mm-hmm. They were all Litvakis or Polacks. I was the only Romanian, but I had my whole strengths, and that's how I grew in strengths. Some people think I had other qualities, but I think my qualities were the three languages. I spoke perfect German, French, and a little bit of English. And they used to call me the foreign minister of the Central Committee of Liberated Jews. And in fact, I must have somewhere, I don't know, in Israel, Adenauer wrote to me, Your Excellency, they began to take it seriously. And then I met General Clay and got very friendly with General Clay. That's where Herbert Friedman comes in, the other chaplain. And Rabbi Phil Bernstein, who was rabbi en route, He wasn't a chaplain, no, he came from America. So that Klausner, I imagine that...
But excuse me, but the impression that I'm getting from you is that you didn't have daily contact with him.
No, and more so, the impression I got is he didn't like the fact that I became the man who had the contact with the army. I became very friendly with the army, and after a certain moment the army preferred to talk with the guys who created the trouble, and not with an American who talked to the guys.
That's important.
For instance, when we went to, in 46 to Frankfurt to meet McNaney, General McNaney, 46 or 47, I don't remember, to get recognition of the Central Committee, Klausner wasn't with us.
Was that because he was back in the States?
I don't know. There's also a second angle to it. I was very active in keeping him out. In fact,
well, this I've never heard before, you said.
Because this is very inside, this is me and him. You see, to understand well Shrita Pleita, to understand us, the basic struggle which we had was not economic. The basic struggle which we had, and I gave it in my first speech in Munich when we were only elected and we met in the Bierbräu-Keller where Hitler declared our deaths, and that's how my career probably started, some people reminded, was that our function was the second R of UNRWA. UNRWA had relief and rehabilitation. UNRWA gave us relief, didn't give us rehabilitation. They brought doctors, they brought administrators of warehouses and so on. And we kept saying, I mean, we are again objects. It's again like Hitler's times. We were nothing, just objects for persecution. He were objects for relief. And probably I was worse than many of the others because I was a very healthy man. You know, I won the war. My friends came out of concentration camps and some were lost the war. And to symbolize my winning the war, I came out with the father and the mother. I was the only man in this whole area who had his whole family. My underground kept my mother and father alive because my services were linked to it. This was my condition. But so it was again language. It was my Romanian language which helped me there, Romanian and German. And my great battle, and that's the function which I fulfilled in the Central Committee, was the battle for rehabilitation. And it went so far that when we met Ben Gurion, I was the guy who told him, I don't want the Jewish agency to represent us. You represent 600,000, I represent 300,000. He never excused me that. Never. We became friendly, I became in Mapai and so on. Never excused me that. That means this finished my political career in Israel, which is good. He didn't like that kind of humans, which is good. May he rest in peace, was a great man. My life went its normal way. Now, Lippmann understood it. Lippmann never wanted to have us as an object. He never wanted to do things for us. My impression was, and I may be 1,000% wrong, but because he was my competitor, see, I was elected, and my job was foreign relations, the outside, and there was an American who had the relations. So it was me or him. And when I have a choice, me or him, it was always me. I am an altruistic, basically very humanitarian guy, but it's me or you. That's how I survived the Germans. Never me or him, I knew what I had to do to him. So I want to stress 100 times that I'm completely not objective, and I was the only surviving Jew who was in competition with Klausner for this very thing. Now, why he left, all kinds of stories. There's a story he was in trouble with the army. There's a story that he began to feel diminishing returns for his work, and I was a reason, there's no doubt. There was a story that the Central Committee became an independent body and had all its functions fulfilled by itself. Now, to give you insight, this was our fight with the JDC too. When I was here in 46 in January, and I met Levitt, who was then the JDC director here, this was my struggle. Don't send doctors to me. I have doctors. I don't need American doctors. Mine are better. Then they used to tell me, how can you compare? And I say, I am comparing. The doctor who survived Hitler is the best doctor in the world. They didn't buy it to the end. Or they would send their directors of warehouses. Didn't trust me. Then my fight was, I'll go public, I'll tell them, we don't need you. These Jews give me the clothing, not you. You are just a channel to transfer it to me. Now what you are doing, instead of a channel, you are becoming a business which runs it for me. And if you talk to Sam Haver, he will, and you mention Retter, my name was Retter, then to this day, he remembers the first day I received him, ihr wird uns das nicht tun. Yes, I was kind of the bad guy in this group, and I was really deeply involved in the spiritual rebuilding. That's why I gave my years to this rebuilding of the image of the Jew as a mensch. Oh, I schrei with me. It's probably if you put it there. Who are we? And I fought for the police. Dr. Blumovich, you heard the name, Dr. Atzmon, who was the big fighter for it, and I helped him a lot on it. Independent hospitals and health services and educational services. Here again with the JDC, they have to give us books, and they want to be in it, and they brought an education officer. We have very educated people. We could put them in our two little pockets, in Judaism and not Judaism. Learn Jews who survived were beyond those who came to us. Of course, Sam Haber was a very sweet man, very good man. He helped us a lot in bridging this JDC previous concept to the more modern concept, where they became partners with us, and the Central Committee signed a document with the JDC. We became equals, and this was, whenever he meets me, he says, remember when you put your finger, wir müssen nur contracts, we have a contract. Yes, I was trying, I want to contract with you, You represent something, I represent something, let's have a deal, let's do it, we are equals. So I'm the bad man to talk about Klausner. I know he has done enormous good before we came, the first few months. I know, but I know it only from stories.
Now, so you're saying that after January 1946, when you came to Munich, the amount of work that you were aware of...
Not only me, the establishment of the Central Committee...
Well, then why did the Central Committee fight for his coming back?
This is not Central Committee. These are individuals in the Central Committee who were his friends. There was never a decision of the Central Committee to bring back Klausner.
Well,
if you show me such a decision, you make $100,000 now.
I think I've seen documents that saying that
Dr. Greenberg would write, or Traeger would write, the presidents would write, we want it. They did it on their own. I found it out much later.
In other words, there was never
a decision of the Central Committee to bring back Rabbi Klausner, not as if I remember. Now, if my dark glasses go so far that there was such a thing that I don't remember it, mea culpa, and I'm prepared to.
But no, I'll have to check.
I'll wait for next Yom Kippur. Now, mind you, I have nothing against the human Klausner.
Yeah.
And I have high regards for what he did till we came in. But then he did not understand what Lippmann understood. At the moment we put up the fight to be it, like we wanted to be Bricha, and we were Bricha, and we were in it, and so on.
And so Klausner still wanted to hold the reins.
Klausner is a very authoritative person, and he has problems in America too. And he took Rabbi Joshua Lippmann's job, and couldn't. It's a personal philosophical problem, probably.
Mm-hmm. Because one gets the impression from other people that he was going strong even after this period. Even when he came back with JDC.
No, that's different. Then he was JDC for us.
Yeah.
Then you don't talk about the chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
Then he had no more chaplaincy. Then there was no more the function of the chaplain as a different human being. Then he enters the whole game of JDC. We had a deal with JDC, he was part of the deal.
Okay, so up to that point, you feel January was a good cutoff point in terms of...
No, it was the beginning, not the cutoff.
Well,
it was the beginning of a central committee which needed less to be babied.
Mm-hmm.
Klausner was really babying us.
Was there anything else that he was able to help you with?
I don't remember. And maybe I don't remember because I was personally involved in a competitive position.
Mm-hmm. In other words, you never remember having to go to him for any particular help, assistance?
No, I imagine I would have lost rather than gone to him to ask for help. We are both not very pleasant types, if you've seen the two of us from that point of view no, I didn't.
In other words, you're both very strong personalities. And there was a conflict there.
Yes, there was a clash. Did you talk to him already? Did he tell you about the letter, about his problems with me? No, which is good. No. I don't know if I should have spoken...
No, I don't think that there's any problem with that.
No, I would not want to touch his image by an iota, because he did a great job.
We're trying to put it into...
To find the truth, yes.
We're not trying to...
That's the only reason why I say what I say.
That's why I appreciate it. I'm not trying to create...
No, I also don't want to make a good impression on you. I don't want to be the good guy who everybody's great, everybody's wonderful, otherwise we don't deal with history and science.
Right, we're trying to be accurate.
There was an inbuilt friction area between a young man being elected from the provinces to the Central Committee, not belong to the gang. I was the only guy who didn't belong. See, they all functioned together for months. They were liberated together.
Right.
You know, the Greenbergs and the Olejskis and the...
Now, the rest of the committee seemed to have been very friendly with him and very...
Yeah, because he was the man who helped.
Right.
They grew with him.
Right.
He was also, I think, instrumental in the beginnings of the committee. That was one more reason why I'm so, and that is because he fought a little bit our central committee, because he was the only central committee, and whenever he was the only, I was the only, and so it goes back a little bit more than that.
I see.
And it wasn't Lippmann so much who fought him as I who fought him.
But Lippmann did fight him.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Very much on the fringe. It didn't have to because I was around and enjoyed always a good fight.
Now, what about the JDC aspect of it, of his being there?
I don't know. I really know nothing about JDC and Klausner.
Okay, fine. Was there anything else on Klausner that you
No.
thought? Okay, fine. Now, what about Herb?
Herb Friedman. Herb Friedman I met in Frankfurt
When?
he worked with Phil Bernstein. This was 46, I think. And I was brought, I remember the first time I was brought to commanding general because some German policeman was shot or something happened in Stuttgart or somewhere, I don't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There was a German policeman, or a Jew shot and a German policeman attacked. There was a very serious business. And this general didn't want the Jews to, he called the representative of the Jews to give it to them. And this was, I think, my debut to tell a general that I'm a general of the Jews, and he didn't ask me to sit down. I became the enfant terrible.
How did that happen? I mean, can we be very specific about that episode?
Oh,
Who was the general? Where was this, etc.?
Clay came after McNarney.
Yeah.
Or Clay was before McNarney.
Right after, I think.
I don't remember the faces.
McNarney and then Clay. Yeah.
And Clay. And I was called in. It was a big room. It was two big flags. Never forget the eagle looking at me. And this general saying, I don't want you Jews to cause trouble. I want you to sit quiet in your camps. We will use blah, blah, blah. I'm the commanding general of. If I'm not mistaken, I remember me saying, you are the commanding general of the American Army, and I'm the commanding general of the Jews who survived. We took bad losses. We lost 6 million, but we won, as you won. And you haven't asked me to sit down. And he went around, put his hand on me, and said, I like the way you talk to me. We became very friendly. And I told him, you must learn to talk to us not as you talk to all DPs. You have two kinds of DPs. Those who lost the war. You have 90% of them here, the Ukrainians and the Lithuanians and the Estonians, who can't go back because they were SS. And they are nice, and their girls sleep with your officers, and everything goes all right. And with us, we won a war. And somehow you're put in that terrible position to have to keep us in camps. And I know you wouldn't want to keep us in camps. Well, you didn't liberate us to move us from Auschwitz camp to Landsberg camp. But you are trapped with us. So we must live together and find the best way to live together. And therefore I propose that from now on we always talk to each other as two people would talk to each other to find the solution. You can solve my problems, I can solve your problems. And I'm prepared to help you as much as I can. If you're prepared to help me, we have to cross this border, and we'll cross it. I don't know about him or Clay, who once called me to tell me you can't cross the border. And I said, I'll see to it, if you shoot one Jew, that the headlines in the New York Times will say, Herald Tribune will say, that General Clay or McNarney finishes the work of Hitler, killing the Jew. Can you afford it? And again, very close. Yes, Phil Bernstein told me later that they really liked me dislikingly, and then we had very interesting relations. And then, of course, the Central Committee was recognized as an official body, and I had an official position. In this whole business, Rabbi Friedman was a strong man. Now, I have great personal liking for him again. See, you deal here with a guy who was deeply involved in it, who didn't look at it, who was in it. So there are likes and dislikes and partnerships and not partnerships. Rabbi Friedman was probably the strongest man around. He had a very peculiar position sitting in Frankfurt. He was my closest contact to Phil Bernstein, to those who came after him. Then was Judge Löwenthal, I think, and then was Bill Haber, if I'm not mistaken. Friedman used to come often to Munich. I used to get lots of advice from him on handling UNRWA. and local military government commanders. He also helped me. There was a Colonel Sidders who became liaison officer between the Central Committee and headquarters, who was a very plain man, didn't understand the whole Jewish thing. And, the whole thing was, why did we fight to have our own police if there was such a good police that you don't have to pay? And why we want our own hospitals? Why not good hospitals? Why do we want our own bad hospitals instead of good hospitals? We had great problems in going to general hospitals where Germans were serving, German nurses and German... this was less than a year after they were killing us. And this was the whole problem. The American army slept with the German girls, and the American officers loved them. And nice homes and nice people, well-clad, and we were a nuisance. So Friedman, I would say, his greatest contribution was in building the image of the surviving Jew as a mensch.
To the army.
To the army, to the outside world. I think Friedman was instrumental in my going to America in January 46, among the first Jews who went to America to meet. I met here the Undersecretary of the Army, Patterson, and I met Peterson, and I, of course, spoke for UJA. So I have very high regards for Friedman and the work which he has done.
What about the trains? Were you involved with
I know that he was deeply involved in transportation problems of Bricha, but I had nothing to do with it directly. Bricha used me only to keep the army out. I was the guy who legalized the movement, who got out.
For example, I don't understand what you're saying.
For instance, there was a moment when there was an order, no crossing of the border.
Right.
And then I was called by Vilo Bricha, went to Frankfurt and opened the border. This was the time when I said, shoot a Jew and try out, and we find legal ways to... the army couldn't feed any more people, so we promised when there are not more people, because people are leaving, and we developed Toite Neshumis. We had all these UNRWA packages who came for the Toite Neshumis, and I was one of the specialists on explaining it to...
What about, was there anything else on Rabbi Friedman that you remember? Any specific episodes?
Very close to us, very great help, strong man, good man.
What about Abramowitz, Rabbi Abramowitz?
I had very little to do with him. He was in Berlin, and we had almost nothing to do. I knew of him, he knew of me, we met, but I had no action. I know that he did great things.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there anybody else that you were involved with, aside from these rabbis?
Chaplains. I knew of the chaplains who were in different areas, but I...
Rowdy, for instance, did you have any
yes,
contact with him?
The guy who's with Ort now,
Right,
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
What do you remember of his activities?
I would find it difficult to say I remember practical things. I know he was involved with... these were what we would call the regional people, the area people. I don't know which area he was even.
He was in Heidelberg?
Heidelberg, probably.
Yeah. He was
Now
in the
these
7th Army.
Yeah, probably. Now, you see, these chaplains would normally function till I came. I always came if the chaplain couldn't do anymore, he couldn't expose himself anymore, and then the representative of the Jews had to come.
I mean with Bricha?
With anything.
Oh, with anything.
Or with friction areas. I dealt a lot with friction areas between the camp and the army outside, or the German police outside. There was black market going on, and people were arrested.
Mm-hmm. So,
you see, the camps were a unit.
Right.
They didn't function in a vacuum. They functioned with
Right.
friction areas. Yeah, a drunk American soldier came in and was beaten up or something.
Right, yeah. Now, so what you're saying to me is that there were times when the chaplain was called in, there were times...
Under the normal level,
Yeah.
the chaplain would solve problems. And I remember when they called me in, they would tell me, we tried a chaplain, we tried a JDC, Aryeh Kubun Health.
And you were able to do things that the chaplain wasn't able to do?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Oh, I was very great on failing. Great specialist on failing. For instance, I remember there was a moment when Jews were brought to a camp, which I don't remember, a terrible camp. They refused to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And the army refused to take them to another camp. Forgotten the name. Getting old. You caught me just a moment before total forgetfulness comes in.
Senility?
Senility, yes. No, don't laugh, young man. It'll get you too. you just started at a much earlier age, you know. I had more exercise than you had. Not Einring, no. Einring. And the Jews wouldn't go in. And the army chick-chack, you don't go with the army, do and then JDC tried, they brought me in. But I was a spokesman of the Jews. I could call the commanding general in Frankfurt. See, whenever there was a conflict locally, I had my line to Frankfurt. And there was a Colonel Michelson, who was G2, who didn't like the Jews, but I had a great business. I told him, Colonel Michelson, want to be successful, you have to be with me, I'm with you. So my whole strength was, you are dealing with a bunch of people who have nothing to lose. So you can lose a lot. And this bunch of people is being backed by a world. Then when I came back from America, I met Lee and United Nations, and I saw to it that they knew about it. So I was the kind of guy who was one of them, with all the links to the outside world. And I had journalists, they were very touchy to public opinion.
Right, because of their own careers.
Their own careers and their own... and they had good intentions, they were just lost with us. Jewish girls wouldn't sleep with these officers, didn't like them. And Jews were black marketeers. And Jews asked for rights, and they wanted this, and they wanted that. And the other DPs were sweeties. The Ukrainians next door just let me live. Now, UNRWA had great problems with us. We were protesting and shrieing. And,
do you remember any other particular incidents where chaplains had to intervene, major incidents? Landsberg case, for instance, or there was a Stuttgart case.
Yes, but in Stuttgart I was brought in.
You were brought in that
yes.
case. Okay.
Landsberg, I remember, I wasn't brought in. There was a great problem. I don't remember why I wasn't brought in. You see, Landsberg was the place where the majority of the great leaders came from. Traeger, the president, came from Landsberg, and Dr. Atzmon Blumovich came from Landsberg, and Oleski came from Landsberg, and Gringaus, the president of our Rat, of the legislative body, came from Landsberg. So there was a second problem with me, but you're not interested in it, you'll write about it.
Yeah, why not?
No, you see, I was the youngest guy.
Yeah.
I was 25 years old. The others were average of 40, 45 years old. Many of them are today 70, so 75. So it was a problem for them to call me into land. They had a problem in general because of languages, and I did my best to bring them with me to generals and to give them status. Because this was power. The guy who spoke to the American was the guy who had power.
Right.
And some people thought that I abused power, was a bad guy. I don't think so. So because I'm very neutral in relationship to myself, and I'm not great enough to be that humble yet. I imagine that Landsberg tried to do it without Leon Retter. My name was Leon Retter. Terrible name. We'll have to finish in about 10 minutes, but I think you have...
Yeah, well, is there anything that I have not touched upon
No.
that you feel...
You see, I am not good for the local chaplains and so on, because I set too high up.
Well, I feel that it was very important to hear what you had to say about Lippmann and Klauser.
Lippmann, Klauser, and Friedman, these
Yeah,
were
well,
my three contacts.
I needed the story from as many dimensions as possible.
Okay, you got it.
And so that I feel that it was very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Be very